I want to emphasize, Mr. President, that it is a resolution. It's not a bill. I also want to emphasize at the outset that it only applies to the Senate. It only applies to the United States Senate. And here's what my resolution would do. It would change Senate rules to provide that when we are in a shutdown, that senators cannot be paid, cannot receive their salaries. Their checks would be, think of it this way, Mr. President, locked in a vault. And once the shutdown is over, the senators could pick them up. Now, if I think everybody in the Congress knows what I'm about to say, may be a bit cynical, but it's true. If I were king for a day, I'm not, and I don't aspire to be, and I wanted to avoid shutdowns, I would do two things. I would provide that members of Congress can't be paid during a shutdown, and I would provide that members of Congress can't leave Washington, D.C. during a shutdown. Now, I can't pass the second part of that. So I'm going to try to pass the first part of that. This resolution, again, it's not a bill, is about shared sacrifice. And I'm not doing it to punish anybody. I'm not doing it to try to embarrass anybody. I recognize that there are varying degrees of wealth among United States senators and their ability to go without a paycheck. I know and like every member of this body, and every member of this body has grown, who has a substantial amount of wealth, has achieved that wealth through their own hard work. And most, if not all of them, started with nothing. And you know what I say? God bless them. More power to them. That's America. So I want to put that up front because I'm sure that some are going to point out that some of our members are wealthier than others. And it's true. I mean, not to single anybody out, but I've seen Senator Rick Scott's house. It's bigger than a Costco, okay? More power to him. He earned that. I've seen Senator Mark Warner's house. It's bigger than a Target. More power to him. He earned that money. He started from nothing. So did Rick. But this bill isn't about that. It's about shared sacrifice and sending a message.
Senator John Kennedy delivered this Senate floor speech in March 2026 during the partial government shutdown affecting the Department of Homeland Security. The shutdown resulted from disagreements over DHS funding, particularly regarding Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, operations during the Iran war. Kennedy's resolution, which passed the Senate Rules Committee unanimously with support from both Republicans and Democrats, proposed changing Senate rules to withhold senator paychecks during shutdowns. The checks would be locked in a vault and distributed once the shutdown ended, meaning senators would not lose money but would experience delayed payment similar to furloughed federal workers. Kennedy's framing of the proposal as shared sacrifice rather than punishment addressed anticipated criticism about senators' varying wealth levels. His examples, Senator Rick Scott's house being bigger than a Costco and Senator Mark Warner's house being bigger than a Target, acknowledged that some senators are independently wealthy and could more easily withstand delayed paychecks. Scott, a former healthcare executive and Florida governor, has substantial personal wealth. Warner, a former technology entrepreneur and Virginia governor, also has significant assets from his business career. Kennedy's point was that regardless of personal wealth, all senators receive $174,000 annual salaries, and withholding those salaries during shutdowns would demonstrate solidarity with federal workers. The two things Kennedy said he would do as king for a day, prohibiting congressional pay and preventing members from leaving Washington during shutdowns, represent his view of what would actually force resolution of funding disputes. He acknowledged he could only propose the pay withholding because Senate rules don't allow preventing senators from traveling. Kennedy's statement that the resolution only applies to the Senate and doesn't affect the House meant House members would continue receiving paychecks regardless of Senate action. This limitation reflects that each chamber sets its own rules independently. The approximately 260,000 DHS employees Kennedy would reference later remained unpaid during this debate. DHS is one of the largest federal agencies, employing TSA screeners, Border Patrol agents, Coast Guard personnel, FEMA workers, Secret Service agents, and cybersecurity professionals. Watch Senator Vance explain why private sector leadership principles demand shared sacrifice, and what happened when Kennedy requested unanimous consent.
So, to all the senators here, I'd ask you to think about a couple of concepts that come from the private sector. I remember the 2008 financial crisis as follows. It was a situation where any day you would think, we're going to face total and complete bankruptcy. I had mortgaged everything I owned in my life. I'd maxed out my credit cards. I took out loans so big, I couldn't even do the math in my head. I'd wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning wondering how I was going to make payroll. My wife would say, "You okay?" I'd say, "Oh, yeah, no, I'm fine." And I think, Mr. President, you've been there. And I had to ask my team to make a lot of sacrifices. We had to cut pay. We had to make a lot of adjustments because it was a matter of life and death. Either the business was going to survive or we were going to collectively perish into the great abyss of bankruptcy. And there's a concept that's important in creating a culture that says, as a leader, you must be willing to live in the shared experience of your team. Now, I will contradict a little bit of what you said. Each of us in this chamber make $175,000 a year. That's not what the average American makes. That is dramatically more than the average American makes. And it's certainly a lot more than what the average TSA worker makes, what the average FEMA worker who's got to go out and help places all over the country. I saw the very sad storms that Hawaii is seeing, and I hope we get help to those people. But it's not going to be me that goes there. It's going to be the hardworking men and women of FEMA that go there, and they make a fraction of what we do. I can't imagine having a job in which for the third time in 6 months, you have to explain to your wife or husband or kids, "Hey, I didn't get a paycheck today." And the kids looking at you going, "Well, what did you do? Like, what did you do to not get a paycheck? Were you insubordinate? Did you not show up for work? Did you yell at your boss?" Nope, I did everything right, other than work for the Department of Homeland Security. Why would you stay in that job? And I think that's the thing that we don't understand is people have breaking points where they just say, "I'm just not going to work here anymore." And this particular agency, more than anything else, has a very simple charter to protect us from dangers from abroad. These are the people that chase transnational criminals. I don't think any of us in this chamber would be willing to go do that. It's tough work. It's brutal work. They put their lives at risk. Not only do I think we should give them their paychecks, I think we should say thank you. Thank you for being willing to do this job. And I'll end with this to my colleagues. We have to eat our own dog food. If we don't eat our own dog food, we will get disconnected permanently from the people that we serve. If we're willing to accept a paycheck that is 3-4 times what the average American makes, and we deposit that every month, we say, "Well, look, I got to pay the bills." I don't care how wealthy you are. If somebody's a multimillionaire or not a multimillionaire, 175 grand a year is a lot of money. Certainly enough to pay the bills. Just ask The people who make 3 times less than that, they figure out how to make the bills. And this isn't about giving up the paycheck or giving up money, which, by the way, I think we should. Like, I don't think we should get paid retroactively. I think we should just say, hey, look, you didn't do your fundamental duty, which is to fund the government. And if you have a policy dispute, then do the hard work. Go into the rooms and make the calls and go out there and persuade your colleagues. But in the meantime, don't punish the workers. Don't punish the workers. I grew up coming to America in the 70s and 80s. I looked at Democrats like Tip O'Neill and JFK. These were Democrats that said, above all else, we are the party of the working man and woman of this country. We are for the people who built this country. The very wealthy, they're just fine. They're just fine. But we focus on the working men and women of this country. And what drove me to run for office is not what I expected ever to do in my life. Believe me, never did. But I do consider it a great honor. Every day, including today, beautiful sunny day, I see the Capitol, I'm like, my God, what would my mom and dad think if they were alive? That their youngest son gets to work in the United States Capitol. It's crazy. It's literally, you know what my mom would say? Only in America. Only in America. But there's 260,000 families that aren't feeling the love right now. The least we could do today is say we join you in that shared sacrifice. We join you so that we can understand what it's like to have to leave here and say, hey, yeah, not good. We're not going to get a paycheck because we didn't do our job. And if we don't do that, what do you think the message it is? You're much more elegant than I am. I think the accent does you 80% of the bidding there. But what do you think that says? What is it? Here's my question. What does a signal of saying, no, 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 we insist on getting paid 3-4 times what the average American makes. We're not willing to sacrifice anything because maybe we're special. Is that the message that's sent? Yield back.
Here, Mr. President, and my good friend Senator Moreno, is the message that it will send if we do not pass this resolution. If it weren't for double standards, we wouldn't have any standards at all. If it weren't for double standards, we wouldn't have any standards at all. Now, the American people see what's going on. As I've said before, not every American reads Aristotle every day. They're too busy earning a living. They're too busy getting up, going to work, obeying the law, trying to do the right thing by their kids. As usual, Senator Moreno makes very salient points. He's aware, as am I, that once again, this is a resolution that just affects the Senate. It doesn't affect the House. Senator Moreno is well aware, as am I, and every member of this body, that this is a bipartisan resolution. To change the Senate rules, I had to go to the Rules Committee. My resolution, our resolution, passed the Rules Committee unanimously. Every single Republican and every single Democrat voted for this resolution. What I hear Senator Moreno saying in a very eloquent way, yes, there are varying degrees of wealth in this chamber, but we all make $170,000 a year. And that's a fortune for most Americans. I'm not saying that senators don't earn that. This bill's not meant to punish anybody. I know some senators who work so hard that $170,000 a year is probably equivalent to about $11 an hour. I mean, they're working all the time. This isn't about that. This is about shared values. This is about sending a message to our colleagues at TSA and elsewhere in DHS that we understand that we're trying to get government back open. But in the meantime, we're going to try in our small way to share your experience. So I would ask my colleagues, please, I don't like to talk too much about doing the right thing because I think everybody in this body wants to do the right thing. We just disagree sometimes over what the right thing is. But honestly, I don't see how any one of my colleagues can disagree with either the spirit or the letter of this resolution.
Senator J.D. Vance, who Kennedy called Senator Marino throughout the exchange, supported the resolution by drawing on his experience during the 2008 financial crisis. Vance described mortgaging everything I owned, maxing out credit cards, and taking loans while struggling to make payroll, experiences he argued should inform how senators approach the shutdown. Vance's central argument invoked the private sector principle that, as a leader, you must be willing to live in the shared experience of your team. In business, leaders who ask employees to sacrifice through pay cuts, furloughs, or other measures typically take similar or greater sacrifices themselves to maintain organizational culture and morale. Vance corrected Kennedy's framing slightly by emphasizing that $174,000, he said $175,000, close to the actual figure, is dramatically more than the average American makes. According to U.S. Census Bureau data, median household income was approximately $75,000 in 2024, making senatorial salaries more than double the median household income. The comparison to DHS workers was particularly pointed. TSA officers, who screen passengers at airports, have starting salaries around $30,000 to $40,000. FEMA workers deployed to disaster zones like the Hawaii storms, Vance referenced, earn varying salaries, but typically far less than senators. Vance's hypothetical scenario, children asking a DHS parent, "What did you do to not get a paycheck?" illustrated the absurdity federal workers face during shutdowns. Unlike private sector layoffs, where individual performance determines employment, federal workers during shutdowns lose pay due to congressional failure to pass funding bills, despite performing their duties correctly. The statement that DHS workers had experienced their third time in 6 months without paychecks referenced previous shutdown threats and continuing resolutions that had occurred earlier in 2026. Repeated shutdowns create particular hardship for workers who cannot plan financially or secure loans when employment stability is uncertain. Vance's characterization of DHS's simple charter to protect us from dangers from abroad and workers who chase transnational criminals emphasized that shutdown victims included law enforcement and national security personnel working dangerous jobs that senators would not perform themselves. During the Iran War, DHS responsibilities included counterterrorism, border security, and protection of critical infrastructure. The breaking points Vance referenced, where workers just say, "I'm just not going to work here anymore," addresses federal workforce retention during repeated shutdowns. Skilled workers in law enforcement, intelligence, and emergency management can often find better-paying private sector jobs with more stability. Kennedy's repeated emphasis that the resolution passed the Rules Committee unanimously, with every single Democrat and every single Republican voting for it, framed what followed as particularly frustrating. Despite bipartisan committee support, a single objection on the floor could block action. When Kennedy requested unanimous consent to pass the resolution, Senator Brian Schatz apparently objected and immediately left the chamber. Kennedy's surprise, "Am I muted?" indicated he did not expect the objection or Schatz's departure, despite having informed Democratic colleagues in advance. The moment triggered extended procedural confusion about whether senators can object without being formally recognized by the presiding officer, a Senate rule Kennedy found counterintuitive and would challenge extensively. The objection left 260,000 DHS workers without paychecks, while senators continued receiving their $174,000 salaries. The Senate floor battle over withholding senator pay during the DHS shutdown revealed a resolution with unanimous bipartisan support in committee, blocked by a single objection without explanation. Vance's private sector argument that leaders must share their team's experience contrasted with the reality that senators earning $174,000 annually would continue receiving paychecks, while 260,000 DHS workers remained unpaid during the Iran war. Senator Schatz's objection and immediate departure from the chamber triggered Kennedy's challenge to Senate rules, allowing objections without public explanation or even formal floor recognition. What remains unresolved: whether opponents will publicly justify blocking shared sacrifice, with federal workers performing dangerous national security missions without pay. We cover congressional proceedings and government accountability. Subscribe for more coverage like this.